Hey, this is Cardell, and today's topic is minimum spec requirements for games in 2025 and beyond. So, I'd like to just kind of give a bunch of information and insight into how the gaming industry is changing in 2025, and it's something we haven't seen for at least 6 to 8 years. And that is the minimum specs are making another generational leap. So if you look back into the past, if you were to go back for like 10 years, let's say, and you look at the top five selling games, and then you look at the minimum spec requirements for those games, over the course of the year or two, you would see basically the same generation. So first gen Intels would jump to a second gen Intel. Maybe they would go into a sixth gen or fourth gen or whatever. So like you'd see a lot of 4770Ks being like minimum spec. While today's systems are a lot different than they were before. So back in those days, you had a lot of single and dual core CPUs, and then they jumped to quad core CPUs. And what happened is the requirements for the games started lasting longer with your processor because you had more cores, they had higher clock speeds. And then we start hitting the Ryzen kind of era. When Ryzen came out, it drastically changed the gaming scene. They had a lot of cores at decent clock rates. Intel was struggling to keep up with them when they came out. They were usually, above Ryzen in some situations, but Ryzen was kind of setting the new standard for core counts. Because of this, the actual processor requirements did not change as fast as the graphics cards. And what we're seeing now is the exact opposite. Since the CPUs are so standardized, the graphical requirements for the games coming out have been getting increasingly more and more demanding on the systems. You might have all the cores in the world, but as the game engines that the games are being made with have more and more feature sets, things like ray tracing and DLSS and frame generation is now coming out, and everybody's game has them now. That your graphics card is getting stressed a lot more than it used to. So, let's just look at this game. So, up on the screen, we have InZoi. This is the Sims, quote unquote, but it's Korean, right? And it was cool. It's okay. I played a little bit of it, but the reason why I wanted to play it is I wanted to see why the system requirements are what they are. So let's scroll down to the system requirements here. So it's in early access. It's not actually out yet, but it has a 10th gen Intel or a 3000 series Ryzen CPU and a 2060, a 20 series GPU or a 5600 XT as a minimum spec, right? Recommended is just crazy. 12th gen, a 7800 X3D, which is absolutely insane. A 3070 or a 6800 XT. This is nuts for a recommended game right now, especially if you look back in the past and the way that it has gone. So the interesting thing is that this is the first game. This is the only game that I know of that has this level of generational jump. So now we've gone straight into 10th gen. There are very few 9th gen Intel requirements games. Most of them are like 8800s, that kind of 8th gen era, and 1600Xs type thing for Ryzen, right? And most of the old GPUs are the 10 series. So you've got like 1070s, 1080s are like minimum spec. This is the first game that we have now jumped into the next series across the board. If the future games that are coming out in 25, 26, 27 have this level of demand on the hardware requirements, the survey that they do every year, you're going to start seeing more and more of the older systems get put into recycles and newer hardware being added into that hardware survey, simply because the new games that people are going to want to play no longer have support for their CPUs. Same thing happened when they jumped to the Ryzen from like the FX series or the Phenom series and stuff like that, right? So it was just there was feature sets on the CPUs at that time that the older ones didn't have. You needed the extra cores and the extra gigahertz and stuff like that on the CPUs to be able to handle the load of supplying the graphics card with enough data. So while we're kind of in that middle ground because the game's not out yet and it's the only one. If you don't want to play this game, there isn't anything yet that has that requirement. Even Dune is not this bad, but it's getting there. It's very, very close to getting there. So yeah, let's go look at Dune. All right, so here we are with Dune Awakening. So this game is coming out on the 10th of June, and its system requirements is still a 1060 and a 7th gen or a 1200 Ryzen. So this game is not as demanding as the InZoi game. So this is still relatively, you could run this on some of the existing hardware that people have been playing so far. So while this game, it looks really like advanced graphically, the minimum spec is still fairly recently like what everything else has been. It's very similar. So InZoi is just kind of one of those games that is pushing the boundaries of hardware beyond what the majority of the games that exist are. So I hope this kind of gives you some perspective on what is going on with the hardware requirements, and I'm willing to bet that we're going to start seeing more games have that generational leap as the year goes on, maybe into 2026, and we'll start seeing people, getting rid of their old 8th gen Intel and 9th gen Intel systems just to get the ability to play some of these new games. So if you like this video, like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.